It's the packet thrower! Welcome to the channel! In this video, we're going to have a look at ChatOps. ChatOps is using our chat programs that we have at our company and use that to get operational data from our network or do some simple changes without having to log in and actually collect all the data for ourselves. So for example, if we have WebEx Teams, and let's just say we have a couple routers here, we can use what is known as a bot to get information from our network based on our scripts and get all our information directly in our chat window, which is going to make it easier for getting some ad hoc information about your network as you're troubleshooting things. To have a look at this, we're going to have to tie a bunch of components together into what we're going to call the ChatOps gateway. And this is going to be our Python application, and it is going to use components such as Python Flask for web services. We're going to need tokens so that we can talk to our WebEx Teams and also get some information from Meraki, because why not? And then we're going to have to do our standard Python requests. And just for fun, we'll throw in some RESTconf and Netmeco in there as well. So how this is going to work is we're going to use the API for WebEx Teams to create what is known as a webhook. A webhook is simply a way of notifying an external service that something happened. And in this case, what we're going to do is when a message event is created, we are going to pass that along to a handy service called ngrok. And what ngrok does is it kind of acts as a bit of a VPN for developers. What it does is it accepts public webhooks and passes it along to your local app, so you don't have to worry about opening up ports or anything for your solution. And then from there, we're going to pass that along to our Python script, which I'm calling the chat app. So the workflow of how this typically happens is we send our chat message, and then it creates a webhook. The webhook will then trigger a script action, which will cause a response to be sent back to our chat window. And then this just carries on in a nice little loop where we just continuously get more information and then we eventually get our response back. The first thing we want to do is get ngrok up and running. So I've logged into the dashboard and it basically gives you the step-to-steps of how to get the tunnel up and running here. Now, ngrok is free and also paid. So the free version lets you run things there, but it doesn't let you specify custom domains, and there's also some other limitations. I have the proper subscription, so I can do all the bells and whistles. So I've already went ahead and downloaded it for Windows, but you can also run this on your Mac or on your Linux system if you want to. And then we need to do the authorized token, and yes, I will be changing this after this video is done. What we do is we open up our Windows terminal and we just paste that command. And what this command is going to do is set up the authorization there so that when I run the ngrok command, it knows what account to bind things to. So that's been done, I can go ahead and run ngrok and then the type of connection, which is HTTP for me. And then we need to know the port, which in our case is going to be 8001. And because I have the paid version, I can specify a subdomain. So I'm just going to do that to make my script prettier. And it's going to say the packet thrower. So now that ngrok is up and running, what's basically happening here is that any traffic that is sent to this packetthrower.ngrok.io will be forwarded to localhost 8001. Then we have some other details here, like the types of connections. So if we can go to this IP address if we want more detailed debugging. And then we can just see some basic things about my plan and such. So we'll have a look at this as we go later on. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to turn our attention over to the WebEx side of the equation. To access our WebEx Teams API, we go to developer.webex.com and sign in. From here, we can do two major tasks. One is we can create a bot, and then the other is we can access the reference API. So first, we need a bot for our script. So I'm going to go over to my icon and then click on my WebEx app. Then to create a bot, all I do is click on create. On this page, we pick what kind of app we want. So we would pick integration if we wanted to do something like create a single sign-on app. But in our case, we want a chatbot, so we'll click on create a bot. We need to give it a name. Call this Meowcat Chatbot. Bot username, which is going to be the same thing at webex.bot. Now, this does have to be globally unique there, so you can't just do like test or anything like that. It's going to be taken there. So as long as you get a green checkbox, you're good. And we do have to pick an icon. So the icon needs to be 512 by 512 pixels if you want to create one, or just pick a generic one. I'm just going to pick the orange one. And we must give it a description. We can type as much as we want, but since this is just a video, I'm just going to say this is a sample bot for my video. So when that's done, we're going to go ahead and click Add Bot. And after it's built, it's going to give us an access token that we can use to communicate with this bot in our script. This is good for 100 years. So we're going to go ahead and copy this because once we move away from this page, it's no longer going to show us this value. We'll have to generate a new one. So for example, if I refresh, we can see that that token is no longer visible. So I'm going to jump ahead to our Python script that we'll discuss later on and just paste in that API key. Just a word to the wise, the API key does give full access to anything that's allowed by that resource. So in this case, this is our chatbot. Not a big deal for me because that chatbot's not going to live too much longer past this video, but you should be a little bit careful with API keys and how you're posting them on the internet if you're doing a lab or such. So with that done, we've created our chatbot for later, and now we're going to turn our attention to creating the webhook that we'll need for our script. We can access the reference API by going to the support page. And then from there, we can click on API reference. What this does is it gives us a list of all the different things we can do on the API, and it also lets us test things out. So for example, if I wanted to see what rooms I have available, I could click on the get method. And then it is going to issue me a temporary personal access token, so I can actually try this out to see what kind of output I'm going to get. I can choose to copy this token if I want to use it on a script, but remember it is only good for 12 hours, so you should be using a bot if you want something more long-term. But anyway, for webhooks, we just scroll down to the bottom and select webhooks. And if we do a search, we should see that I don't have any on my account right now. So to create one, we click on the post method. And we can see here it gives us a reference of everything we need there, such as the resources and the events. So first we just need to give this a name. I'm just going to call this Webhook. And then for the target URL, this is where the webhook is sending the event, and this is where our ngrok comes in handy. So we're going to go ahead and copy the URL that we're running, and this is going to ultimately forward the traffic to our Python script that we haven't quite got to yet. So for resources, we can do things such as attachments, memberships, messages, or rooms. Messages is the most appropriate for what we're doing because we want to be able to type a message to the bot and have something happen. For the event, we can pick between created, updated, deleted, or not listed, but we can also use all. We're just going to say created, which means that when we create a message, that's going to trigger the webhook. We can also choose to filter if we want to have this only apply on certain rooms, and we can add a secret if we want extra security, but we're not going to bother with that. So when I run this, we can see that everything is okay. We got our 200 status code, and we have all our output created. Next, what we're going to do is hop over to the Meraki API so that we can also have our script query my Meraki lab. The Meraki API is pretty simple. All we need to do is log into the portal, and then hop over to profile. And then when you scroll down on the profile page, you have your API keys. I already have one there, so I'm just going to go ahead and revoke it. And then I'm going to generate a new key. And I'm going to copy this, let it know that I've stored it, and go done. And then in our script, I'm going to go down to the API variable and paste that in. And then I also need to know what the default network is. So I am going to go ahead and open up my Postman. And then I'm just going to go through my various APIs here. Meraki. And then list networks. And then I just need to update the API key here. So I'm going to go to the Meraki dashboard. Update the key there as well. And the network ID I want is this guy. Okay, so that's everything I need for the Meraki side there. Next we'll actually go through this monstrosity of a script and then we'll test it out. Okay, the time has come to have a look at our chat box script. You can see that it's fairly lengthy at 272 lines. So I don't want to go over this in too much depth. So what I'll do is I'll just describe the various sections, and then when we get into like a later course, I'll talk about how to properly build these on your own. So the first thing we do in pretty much any Python script is import the modules we need. The first item that we import is Flask, and Flask is a lightweight web server that Python uses that can handle our requests that will be sent to us through our ngrok. The request is basically just our standard API calls, and then I'm also using Netmeco because I'm connecting to some Cisco routers, and that's just going to contrast our RESTconf. So I broke this up into several sections there. So for the Netmeco RESTconf section, I have went ahead and defined a few variables. So we have our device IP, the port for the RESTconf, and then we also have my lab username and password. And because it's Netmeco, we need to let it know what operating system it is. So we're just saying it's an iOS XE because it's a CSR router. Then we've already imported the WebEx API team. And for the rest of this, we kind of focus on the actual WebEx class here. So this is the WebEx Teams API URL. We can get that from the support page that we were looking at. And then what I've done is I've created a class for our WebEx communication. So here is where I've instantiate the class. And then I create some functions for getting messages, for posting messages. And I also define a function for posting in Markdown. This is so I can use Markdown formatting in the messages, and then this guy here is just for generic text, because WebEx Teams considers them two different options when we're sending messages. Then it moves on to the Meraki section, so yet again we're defining our variables specific to Meraki, including our API key that we did in our organization. And I didn't explicitly show you in the Meraki video, but I should have also grabbed the organizational ID, but I would just grab that from Postman. The Meraki class is again pretty simple. We're setting up our variables, and then we have two functions, one for getting networks and one for getting SSIDs. Because what we want is the chatbot to be able to get my wireless networks. Next up is the class for the Netmeco. So yet again, we're setting up the class. And then I've defined some functions around which commands we're sending. So I'm doing a show IP interface brief and excluding the unassigned addresses. I'm doing a command for the routing table and also for the version. And then I've also added a function to reset the connection, and the reason why is that I wanted to be able to because I wanted the script to support several routers. But when we define the connect handler, it's already going to be connected to the main router, so I opted to have a reset function so that it can restart the SSH session with the new router. There's different ways I could have handled it there, but it's just how I opted to do this for this example. The REST class is for our RESTconf connection, so yet again we're setting up our class. The reset is the same functionality as what I talked about for the Netmeco connection. And then all I'm doing here is I am getting the host name using RESTconf, and I'm basically just returning the Yang response and cleaning it up there so it's just the host name. To use classes, you have to instantiate them into variables before you can use them properly, so I went ahead and created one for each class. So Meraki is going to be for Meraki connection. Router is going to be for our Netmeco, and REST is going to be for our RESTconf. The rest of the script is all about the Flask configuration, which is our web server. So we can see here I've defined it as app. I'm using port 8001, which if you remember from our ngrok is what we're using for the connection there. And I'm instantiating the WebEx into something called Messenger, but that should actually be up in this section. So we'll say WebEx Teams. There we go. Just so it flows a little bit better when we're looking at it later. And then the rest of this is the actual Flask configuration. So essentially what we're doing here is anything that is hitting our ngrok URL and ending the URL with a / is going to match this here. And then the response is going to be processed to get the data out of request. And then we're going to look at the contents of the received message we got. So once we assess the message, we're going to check the contents to see what the command is. The command is going to start with a / in this environment. And then it's going to be either CSR 31, 32, or 33, because those are the three routers in the environment, or it is going to be /Meraki. So this section is determining what router name is selected, and that is going to ultimately reset the connection with the proper Netmeco. Again, I could have done this in the cleaner way, it's just what came to me at the time and I figured it'd be fun. And then we start getting into the actual commands. So if it starts with CSR, then what we're going to do is split up the second command. And if there is no second command, I'm going to assume you want the interfaces. From there, we just tell it what we're actually doing. So if we want get interfaces, it is going to send a message saying superbot show IP interface brief, and then it's going to paste out the output. Likewise, we can do get routes for the routing table, get version for the version, or get host name for the RESTconf. For Meraki, it's a similar logic. We're splitting up the commands again, and if we don't specify something, it's going to assume SSIDs. If the action is network, we can specify a different network to look at. Otherwise, it's going to use that default network variable that we set. And then for the SSIDs, it's just going to loop through and get all the SSIDs in my Meraki network. It's going to send the output like as per usual. And then lastly, we actually call the Flask application so that it runs. So we covered a lot in this script here. I wouldn't worry about trying to replicate exactly how my script works there, though I can make it available if people ask me for it. The main idea of this is just to show you what's possible rather than how to code this solution properly. But with that, what we can do is go ahead and run this. So I'm just going to go run. And we can see that the Flask is running on port 8001. And if you remember, if we look at our ngrok, that is what we're running here. So anything that goes to the packet thrower.ngrok.io gets forwarded to 8001, which is our Flask application, which is going to parse anything that hits that for WebEx data. And it's going to have that WebEx data because of the webhook we set up that is going to forward any events that we make in the chat room. So this is my WebEx Teams. I went ahead and am direct messaging our chatbot to keep things a little bit cleaner. So I can use this by just saying /CSR31, and we can see it's defaulted to show IP interface brief information. If I wanted to see router 2, or 32 in my case, we can see that works too. And we'll do the same thing for 33. So that's pretty cool. If I wanted to do other things, I could do pick a router and then say get routes. And we can see the routing table. We can do 31 get version. And if we want to try out a RESTconf, we can go pick a router and just say get hostname. Cool. If we want to try the Meraki side of things, we can go /Meraki. And that is going to spit out the various wireless networks I have configured. And then we can also do /Meraki networks. So we can see I have a home network, I have a lab network, and then I also have the system manager, which is their MDM. So hopefully you found this cool. We're using our chat program to get information with our routers. We can use this to get anything we want there, so I could have this ping different routers or do more logic there. I'm just doing a very standard run a command. For the most part, it's easy to add things there. I would just go ahead and define a new function for a command. So for example, if I wanted to say, what's another command? Show IP protocol. And then if we go down to our switches, if action was to say protocol, and adjust our message a bit. If I save this and restart our server, I should now be able to say /CSR32 get protocol. Is that what I typed? I don't remember anymore. Memory of a goldfish. Oh. Made a typo, but it's not worth fixing right now, so I'm just going to say paste. Typo aside, we can see that it's just that easy to add things there, and if I wanted to get more creative, like add a ping command or do more advanced functions, like maybe flap a router or reboot it, we could do that if we really wanted to. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this lecture, and I'll see you next time.